financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions. Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, and as you can see, I've lost a friend, but we are going to be dropped in upon by Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Enterprises and perhaps Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic. But we've picked up a new F here at TGAF. Joining Jack Glor of CBS News is Jack Glor, and from what I understand, this is Jack Glor's debut on any kind of media platform. Maybe he's done some TikTok or some things with his local school, but in terms of a high-powered professional operation, this is Jack Glor's debut. Is that right?
Yep.
I don't think he's even done anything on TikTok or anything. This is it.
You've never posted anything on YouTube even?
Well, yeah, when I was like 7, but
oh, see, well, that's the rookie card right there is the YouTube. But we are going to take credit for the launch of Jack Glor's career. His father works at a network that employs Jim Nantz, Ian Eagle, Kevin Harlan, known for Greg Gumbel and Brent Musburger and Pat Summerall, and John Madden. But Jack Glor has decided his son needs to get his start with Tim Graham.
All those guys you mentioned are incredible, but I do believe that Jack has they're amazing. This man has the potential to surpass all of them.
Of course, we all do. So do I.
You do, and you might.
At 52.
Yeah.
Jack, you want to get into sportscasting? Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Or is that just what your mother is forcing you to do?
I'm interested, but that's true.
All right. Well, you're how old though?
14. I just turned 14.
14. All right. Well, we got time. My son's about to go to college. He doesn't know where he wants to go, what he's going to study. So at 14, to know what you want to do here is impressive. And I'm guessing that you have some things that you can do at school here in the year 2023 that your father couldn't at Hoover Elementary or Kenmore East High School. Some things at your disposal, some resources. What do you know? You doing some things? Are you able to get on?
He's mostly we're having him.
And
what are you doing? I mean, he's pretty amazing to watch the games with. He'll pull out these stats or things that I look at him I'm like, what? How do you know that? So I think I don't even know how you absorb all this.
Well, let's put Jack on the spot here.
Yeah,
he's
being shy right now.
Okay, well, here's the thing. You're going to have to get over that. No one-word answers. I'll do a better job of asking questions that don't require a yes or no answer. But let's go. Let's get some thoughts on the game that you were in attendance, Jack Glor, Sunday afternoon, Lincoln Financial Field, Bills versus Eagles. What was your take on what transpired before your very eyes?
So first of all, when Josh Allen got ripped to the ground on the horse collar that should have been called, I think it was a little absurd that he got called for intentional grounding when Gabe Davis was still in the area. But I feel like maybe at least offsetting penalties with intentional grounding and horse collar. But the fact that they just called it on the Bills, even though Josh's jersey just got ripped off, is kind of ridiculous. And then we still should have won the game, I feel like. But we had our chances and we didn't convert on them. But the rest were also a big part, in my opinion, of our loss.
Yeah, the refs and I don't know if you take a look at The Athletic at all. I wouldn't if I were your age, but it's what I do for a living. And your father is so kind as to donate a few bucks a year to keep me employed by getting a subscription.
I
But
would
I've
pay
never.
more, but they don't ask me.
What's this?
I would pay more, but they haven't asked me.
Well, I'll do that. I'll send you a Venmo request, or you can tip me in some way. I'll do a tip jar. I think you can do that on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. But I think that it is unbecoming to whine about officials. I'm not saying this against you, Jack, because I'm about to make a big twist here. I have never written in the past about bad calls, officiating, because it's always been my belief that teams just have to overcome it. It's a part of the game. But for the first time in my career, after 30 years of doing this, I wrote a piece that was just about how bad the officiating was. And your father was kind enough to retweet it. We had a discussion about it earlier today. It is getting bad. It's getting bad to the point that I think it is corroding consumer confidence in the NFL and all sports, really. But I think it used to be something that people were upset about. You rolled your eyes. But now with gambling so closely associated with professional sports, I don't roll my eyes when people complain about the officiating anymore. I think it's a legitimate concern that's at the core of all sports.
I think you're right. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but we have a buddy. I won't mention his name. You should mention his name, Jack, who bets big, and he always says he bets a lot of money on games, and he's always said he's like it's rigged. And every time he says it, I'm like, come on, give me a break, man. That's ridiculous. And you've seen me say this, and Jack will sort of like listen to him because he likes the guy. He's a smart and good guy. Last game, I really hate to say this, just as I think you didn't want to write that article. Last weekend was the first time when I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what is going on? It got to the point where it was almost like, I cannot believe you made that call. I know they have a hard job. I get it. I do not envy the job of officials, and we bitch about it every single week. Last week, you wrote that article. Last week was, I think, may have been, as far as I can recall, the first time I've really sort of just tweeted about it. And I didn't think I did it angrily or anything. And then I saw your article the next day, and I was like, man, so I don't know what the solution is. Do you allow more of these calls to be reviewed?
Yeah, that is something that is done in the Canadian Football League, and it's probably a story that I should do. But they allow coaches challenges on penalties. Same challenge system, roughly. It's just that it's not about the outcome of a play or a ruling in terms of a spot or whether or not it was a catch. They can actually challenge interference or a hold or whatever they want. But yes, I think it is, and I use the word corrosive. I did a story back when the daily fantasy ads were so obnoxiously ubiquitous on television. We're talking, what would it have been, 7-8 years ago, Jeff? You remember it. It was every 2 out of every 3 ads were either FanDuel or DraftKings. They were just sinking so much money into it was a new frontier. And so I did a story and I interviewed former Major League Baseball Commissioner Fay Vincent. And I think he used the word corrosive, which is where I'm pulling it from, that he thought gambling, because it's going to get to the trust of the game. And we're seeing it here and there with players who are getting caught betting. You think of the people who it would be almost impossible to catch. Let's say I have built up a good relationship where I exchange texts with a Bills offensive line coach or somebody, as guys go on to other teams. Let's say it's somebody who's now on Brian Dable's staff who used to work with the Bills. I could get little nuggets of, hey, what are your 10 scripted plays going to be to start the game? Maybe I want to go with this running back getting the over or that type of stuff. Maybe where it's not shaving points so much, but it's insider information trading. That's the type of stuff that I think can be dangerous. But then the officiating element of it is the real damaging stigma that you can get. So Jack, you mentioned the penalty, the non-call on the horse collar, the intentional grounding. What did you think the turning points of the game were? You mentioned also, they still had a chance to win. What when you think back on Sunday, what are the pivotal moments for you?
I mean, the refs were still like a big part, but I feel like you saw like the penalties were like 1-5. Like Philly had like one false start, and then we had like 13 penalties for like 150 yards in total. But we also it wasn't just the refs, but like some of the calls were like kind of baloney, but I feel like some of the calls were like our fault and like completely unnecessary, and it wasn't just the refs, but we still had a chance to win the game.
I think Jack gets frustrated by by also, and I do too, by the timeout usage and calls.
Yeah, it's like Sean McDermott's like calling timeouts, like his first 2 timeouts in the first quarter and like third quarter, when it could be really valuable late in the game.
All right, so I said fan confidence has never been lower in Sean McDermott in my most recent column. Where is Jack Glor's confidence in Sean McDermott as the head coach of the Buffalo Bills moving forward?
I mean, he needs to clean a lot of stuff up, like for example, like timeouts, but like I don't have that much confidence in him.
I think I still do. I get the point that you make, Tim, as far as being up sort of tightly wound, and that may not be what the Bills, given everything the Bills have dealt with, not just in the past couple of years, but historically. And so Jack hasn't seen all this, thankfully, but he's getting a pretty good indication of what it means to be a Bills fan over the past few years. So I think that's a good point. The one thing I will say, and I don't mean it, he and Bean, they brought a winning culture to Buffalo. And yes, it helps that they have a quarterback.
Yeah.
But they have. And you wrote about this too, the Pegula track record in hiring head coaches, whether it's in hockey or football, was not always great. But with McDermott, generally speaking, it has been, right?
And that could be extended to general managers also. I didn't want to bog down the story by getting into general managers, but that's been equally almost as bad.
Yeah.
So what's it like watching a game with your dad, Jack? Is it, do you get to hear about the old days when he was a fan and how lucky you are? I think I just got a glimpse of it there, so I want to maybe drill on that a little bit. How much does he remind you of how easy you've had it as a Bills fan with them making the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years?
Yeah, I always say like I'm done being a Bills fan and everything, and it's like tiring kind of. I've been through it for like 14 years, but he's been through it for like almost like 50. So and like 30 of those were like 30 plus years of them were us not making the playoffs, and now almost like every year we're making the playoffs, just not getting to the Super Bowl. So
there was a period there where Boston sports fans of a certain age probably had the luckiest run because all 4 of their teams had won championships and multiple in some cases. Jack, are there some names he likes to drop on you, names that you don't know that send you to your computer? Does he give you, does he say words like, words that maybe sound like a different language, like maybe Naaman Roosevelt or Chidi Ahanatu what are some, does he give you some names that you have that send you to the research? The
last game we were at, this is being recorded, by the way, I should mention. See this?
Is that Mom?
This is Mom.
Well, this is
Nicole. This is Molly Glor.
Sit up straight.
She told me to sit up straight. Yeah.
And he talks about Jim Kelly a lot.
Yeah.
But also, I should say, I'm an Eagles fan, and
she's an Eagles fan.
We had bad ref calling in our Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So to lose a game against the Eagles for bad ref calling is a thing, but to lose the Super Bowl, with bad calls.
But
I was crying, but
The-
I'll let them finish.
Okay.
Well, I
fact-
just want to say while you're there, Mrs. Glor, that I'm happy that somebody in that office would agree with me. I was taken to the social media woodshed on Sunday by daring to call the game a thriller. Because as you can guess, most of my followers on social media are Bills fans. They were not happy that I called it a thriller.
Well, anytime it's overtime. it's
You
a-
had a fun time watching the game Sunday.
She watched in a separate room.
Yeah,
she
we
wouldn't.
can't watch
She didn't
together.
watch. She didn't watch with us.
Whose choice was that?
Hers.
My daughter and I, our daughter and I.
My daughter.
Well, she's my daughter because she will actually cheer for the Eagles. He will never.
So,
He is
all
a
right.
diehard Bills.
Civil
and
War.
It has
Yeah,
been a
it
civil
really
war
is.
because she thinks I should have raised him as a Bills and Eagles fan. I always make the case you can't really cheer with your true everything for more than one team. I don't
I
think.
cheer for the
in
Bills. They're
sports.
my second favorite team. I cheer for the Eagles. I only gave birth to him and carried him for 9 months, but God forbid he ever cheer for my team. He actually cried when the Eagles won the Super Bowl because he's like, "When are the Bills gonna win?" Anyway,
Well,
Did he
that's-
actually cry? He had tears?
Well, he did. Jack did. I didn't.
She tapped you on the shoulder when she said it.
he cried.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm like, "There's no crying in football,"
Yeah.
but he was like, "Let him,
Okay.
let him cry."
Well, it's good to meet you. Thanks for joining the podcast. Here,
Um,
this is a good time. Let's bring in Jonah Bronstein, whose
Yes.
internet is now working. Jonah Bronstein, he of course of Bronstein Enterprises. Jack, this is my usual co-host of the show, and you of course know that because you watch Tim Graham and Friends every week. Right, Jack?
Yep.
Oh, here's Jonah. He's sideways.
sideways.
Oh, am I sideways? Hey, I'll fix that.
That's an easy way to do it.
There you are.
Yeah, well,
Jonah?
Jonah Bronstein
Hey, Jeff, how
joining
you
us
doing?
here. Looks like some sort of Tetris design we have going where Jonah is holding up the rest of us with his column there. So this is Jack Glor, Jonah. He's been giving us his thoughts on the game Sunday and also refereeing writ large in the NFL. Let me ask you, did you watch the game last night, Jack, so you can join in this next question?
I saw like the first quarter, but then I did my homework and went to bed. But I saw that like
boy.
I thought it was gonna be a low scoring game, like starting off with like 7-3 and then like that nice touchdown. I didn't see Seattle scoring like any points at all. Like I did not believe in their offense whatsoever. I felt like it would be like a 31-10 to or 13 game, but it was like it was beyond me that they were scored like 76 points.
Well, that is actually a pretty common bit of feedback that we get from our guests on Tim Graham and Friends is that they have to do their homework and go to bed before the late game. So we do sometimes have to ask them to record it so they can watch it in the morning. Jack, there's a reason that Tim Graham and Friends usually records around 3 p.m. On Friday afternoons. We'll get into that maybe some other time or have your father explain it to you.
But I think the point you're making, Tim, is that weren't there in the game last night, weren't there like 275 yards?
Yeah,
of
well,
penalties?
that was the question I was going to ask. We're getting into consumer confidence. Yeah, 275 yards in penalties. And so Pete Carroll said in his post-game news conference that this has to be eliminated from football. And he doesn't mean sloppy play. He was talking about over officiating or too many flags. The game's not as fun as it used to be, or at least in his eyes. And he's obviously seen a lot of football.
Yeah.
Al Michaels was chiding the officials. It's gonna drag things down. I think they're gonna have to make some holistic changes about what they need to do or how they call the game. Jack, what are you doing with your bye week? Are you in recovery?
Yep. I'm in rehab and hopefully that I'm happy that I can get 1 week without misery, basically, and trying to just enjoy other football games and cheering against the Chiefs and the Dolphins.
Yeah.
This is, I think, what Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are referring to when they talk about grooming. is you making your son a Bills fan.
Oh my gosh.
And I think you should be in jail.
I don't think
Why are you doing this?
I don't think he gets those references, but so this is so you are one of our family chains. We have multiple family chains that sort of just commiserate over all this. But one of the family members, one of our uncles, was sending out, all these things that have happened. We're cursed, all these different bad ways to lose. And my other uncle said, like, to this one uncle, he said, listen, we cheer for the Bills not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And it's, I don't know. I mean, we make it exciting, don't we?
Yep, we just don't finish.
That's called rationalization.
Isn't it? Well, I don't know what else to do. I'm not going to pick a different team.
Well, we've had a run actually of guests on Tim Graham and Friends. And of course, I would hope that Jack would be eliminated from this part of the conversation. But Ryan Nobles was on a few weeks ago. Ryan Nobles of NBC News. Nick Bakay was on last week. And they have come to this feeling that the losses have come to hurt way more than the wins. And their belief is that they've been teased into thinking that hope is right around the corner, or that the Super Bowl might be within reach. And now it's starting to slide away a little bit. And the losses, and they weren't saying it in a tongue-in-cheek way. They were saying it in, I'm worried about how much I put into this team and how much, for my own mental health, how much I commit to being a Buffalo Bills fan. Have you gotten to that point yet, Jeff?
Yeah, for about 47 years. Yeah, no, I sort of, it's just part of me now, so I get it. I think I've been able to at some point I'll write a book and try to process this, I guess, just that particular part of it. But I don't know what else to say. It's me. Like, it's part of me and it's part of him now. So
It's part of the fun.
It's part of the fun. And yes, I still have hope. I don't, and so, yes, so I hang on every article that you write, it helps that they're good and you do a good job at it. I do think I was surprised that all of your sources say there is zero chance.
Well, it was two
McDermott's
sources
wrong.
said zero. The other two said they would be shocked, that they don't expect anything and they would be shocked.
Don't they always say that until it happens?
Well, these are sources that I know. I mean, I can't give too much away, but
Please don't.
if I give too many clues, then you might be able to figure out who I'm talking to. And I'm always hesitant to do that for their sake, not necessarily for my sake.
I don't want
I already know who it is. I already
They
know who
need
you're
their
talking
cover.
about.
Jonah is good at guessing who my sources are. Usually about four beers in at Elmo's, and he starts picking at me. So Jack, I will say this though, and maybe this is where we can get into the existentialism of being a Bills fan. As somebody who grew up a Browns fan, I really didn't have much choice. I was in Cleveland. I was surrounded by it. And an Indians fan. Cleveland, very similar to Buffalo, and the loser cycle, monotony of losing, heartbreak, etc. I think you can kind of wear it as a badge a little bit. And I think your dad probably does it too, is that you've put in the time. It hasn't been easy. So maybe Jack Glor needs a season like this to become an official Bills fan.
Yeah.
Or even last year, maybe last year counts with everything that happened.
Yeah, with Hamlin, and now this year, 6-6. Hopefully, I mean, when we lost to the Broncos, I was already saying, we still have a chance. I think we will beat the Chiefs next week. Because just both teams have been struggling, but we usually get KC in the regular season. Yeah, maybe I just need that to be a permanent Bills fan.
Do you think we're going to make the playoffs?
Yes, we will make it over the. I think I don't think we'll make the division, but I do think we can make it past the Steelers, them finding Matt Canada, and I just don't think their offense is averaging like 7 points a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's strange that you go back 2 or 3 weeks and the AFC North looked like the strongest division, perhaps in both conferences.
And then Steelers with their coordinators gone, Joe Burrow out for the year. Yeah, it was crazy.
And
And
Deshaun Watson gone for Cleveland.
Deshaun Watson out for Cleveland.
How about that surprising AFC South, though?
Yeah, I mean, I'm cheering on the Texans because I don't like the Jaguars since we lost them. But I like CJ Stroud. I liked them like before the NFL draft last season. I was saying how Stroud is much better, and I thought Bryce Young was going to be a bust. And now here we go, Bryce.
He was saying that.
Yeah, and now Bryce Young's 1-10, and CJ Stroud can take the division and go to the playoffs as like a really good season. He's probably most definitely going to win Rookie of the Year.
It's going to be an interesting last 5 games. It seems strange to think there are only 5 left, too.
And so
It is crazy. I still think I still think they're gonna I wouldn't bank on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go 3-2 and still make the playoffs.
yeah.
That would be hard. A 9-8 team did make the playoffs last year with tiebreaker. I think it was the Dolphins. In fact, I think they made it with a tiebreaker over Pittsburgh, maybe.
Oh, it's only with a tiebreaker. Okay, all right.
And so tiebreak, but that's last year. I mean, things could fall apart. I think that to Jack's point about rooting for the Texans, while they are a fun team and they deserve, they're a team I root for just because they're cool. I like the idea of doing it the right way. They got rid of Deshaun Watson, going against how I would like to have seen the Browns not do anything with Deshaun Watson. I now root for the Browns to go 0-17 as long as they operate the way that they do. And now Warren Buffett's firm is accusing Jimmy Haslam's family of trying to bribe his company for over his business. So now the Browns are a greasy organization. Let's just put it that way. I like what the Texans are doing, but I think as long as the Texans are playing well, that's another team the Bills are going to have to worry about beating out for the playoffs. I think the Bills need the Texans to maybe fall apart. They definitely need the Colts to stop losing. I don't know where that's coming from, but.
Hey, Jeff, let me ask you, but I like Jack's opinion with the different, age and experience as a Bills fan. Do you want the Bills to make the playoffs because of the opportunity to win the playoffs and win the Super Bowl in the postseason, to be in the championship chase, or is it all part of not going back to being a non-playoff team, not slipping back to what was also familiar for you as a Bills fan?
That's a good question, Jonah. I only want them to make the playoffs because I want them to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, like
there's no other reason. I don't, if they don't, it's not about slipping back. This team is. If you look at some of the other teams that are like 6-5 or 6-6, it sort of is absurd that the Bills are 6-6, given the talent level they have.
Yeah.
Plus 111 in scoring.
I mean, it is ridiculous on many levels, but it is what it is. So, but to your point, no, I don't believe that we're like out of this. I realize some more tough choices come up next year when Josh's number increases and the salary cap and, but I loved what Nance said like a few weeks back. I forget, was it the Dolphins game or whatever? And he kept talking about the Bills window is closing, the Bills window is closing. As long as Josh Allen is playing well, the window's open as far as I'm concerned. And you may be surprised to hear that, but I don't think there may be some dips and whatever, but I'm not. Even if this year doesn't happen, and again, this may be me rationalizing it. It probably is, but I feel pretty good about the next decade.
Yeah.
Do you see some silver lining if the Bills were to miss the playoffs, especially if you're in any sort of mindset that you want to see a coaching change? Would the Bills bottoming out or more kind of falling back? Is that anything a Bills fan would want to see?
I don't know. I think we were talking about that before you hopped on, but a little bit, and that I like the culture that McDermott has brought. I realize that he's on the hot seat right now. I get it. I understand it. Some things frustrate myself and Jack too, like the use of timeouts, the sort of game management.
Yeah.
It does seem like we lose a lot of these close games that other teams don't, which is, I don't know who else you put that on but the coach. I don't know, Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, McDermott keeps using his timeouts, but like he's using 2 timeouts in the third quarter. Like if we need a game-winning drive from Josh, McDermott needs to give him his timeouts, and then Josh can do the rest. And he's just not very good coaching.
Don't you find it fun, the unexpected nature of Sean McDermott's timeouts? You never really know when they're going to be taken and how.
Well, like the last game, what was it? I mean, we lost. If I remember correctly, a team beat us with 13 seconds left and 2 timeouts in a game. Not beat us, but tied us in a game a couple of years ago.
When was that?
Stop. We had, now tell me if I'm wrong, but there was in the Eagles game, there was a timeout taken to like set the defense. And wasn't there like another timeout taken to like freeze the kicker when he was already rushing onto the field?
Yes.
And would have been rushed to begin with. So you would have had 22 seconds and 3 timeouts.
3 timeouts, and then you have 1 timeout, and you're basically throwing the game out the window.
I don't understand that.
Missed the field goal.
I don't understand that.
I would like to see teams work on some sort of theatrical, we're about to call a timeout, but then they don't. I think that would be a way to really get inside a kicker's head, whether it be having your linebacker like getting close to the ref and going like this, or for those of you listening on the podcast, I'm doing the coach on the verge of calling the timeout right before it hits 4 seconds. And then when it gets to 4, he goes bang and then they call it. Or start talking about it without saying it. Like you'd probably need to tell the officials before the game, hey, we have this here. If we don't actually call for the timeout, we don't want it. And so the kicker might be ready or thinking, all right, well, they're going to call the timeout. And then here it comes. And there's 3 seconds left on the clock. And I would like to see a team try that.
I like it. Yeah.
Another genius idea from the mind of Tim Graham.
Oh, yes. Jack, what do you have to deal with from your classmates being a Bills fan?
So,
You're in New York, right?
Yep, Giants fans, like Patriots fans, all kinds of fans except Buffalo. And I mean, I had to deal with a lot after a loss, but and they always say the key part of the game of how we lost, like the Giants game that we won, for example, barely in a nail biter. They were saying they're when class just started, they're saying how that's clearly pass interference on the on Darren Waller with Taron Johnson, and they're showing me videos the entire class period about it.
He gets it bad.
Yeah.
Fairburn's coming on, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He just texted.
Matthew Fairburn got the Jack Glor bat signal, and he was podcasting with Chris Baker. So he may be dropping in on us too.
He asked
Jack,
if we were still blabbing. I said yes.
Yeah, and we'll continue. Jack, what's in your jersey collection? What are we wearing these days, and what are you not wearing? What jerseys do you own that you have maybe put into reserves because you don't want to be seen in them?
Well, usually whenever the Bills lose, I either it's depending on the Bills what I wear to school on Monday. Either Bills apparel or the opposite of Bills apparel, no Bills apparel whatsoever. I'm not a Bills fan.
Gotta go incognito.
Yeah.
So do we have what do we wear? I mean, do we have a Von Miller jersey in the rotation?
Oh gosh. No.
Do we have Gabe Davis?
No, we have Diggs, Allen, Trey White. He didn't that was
Milano. Who else do you have? You had Edmonds.
I had Edmonds, but had to get rid of that. But
Get rid of it. How do you get rid of it? Do you trade it with a Bears fan for
No, his sister wears it.
Yeah, I just gave it to my sister.
Oh, because she's just into jerseys. She just
He
wants a
doesn't know the
jersey.
difference. He doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter was like that. Jersey didn't matter who was on it. In fact, my niece my niece wanted jerseys for Christmas one year. My brother said, and this was years ago. And so I went to the clearance rack, and she was decked out, and she had one of the nicest Marshawn Lynch Bills jerseys you could ever have. I'm trying to think. There were a couple others that I got pretty much just for fun. Yeah, nobody is ever going to buy this in Buffalo. I can't remember who it would have been. Maybe like a Don. There might have been a Dante Whitner in there.
Gosh, who's the Clemson running back we drafted a bunch of years
CJ
back?
Spiller.
Yes, that would be one. That would be in that category, I think.
So Jack, you're on here with two people who teach college level sports journalism. Do you have any questions about what you should do for your school? Because I don't know that your dad can handle these types of questions.
Oh, I don't know, probably like what kind of stuff you do in like just like sports broadcasting in general.
Like how they get ready?
Like yeah, how you prepare for like broadcast and like what work you have to put into like for each broadcast during the week.
Well, that is the kind of the monotonous stuff. That's the stuff that people would say isn't fun, but I find that to be the most fun. That's the research part of it. And if you're naturally curious, which I luckily am, then you find yourself going down research rabbit holes during the week. And I think that for games, although with sportscasters these days, it's not like the old days of Brent Musburger or Pat Summerall and John Madden, where you get one game a week. I think that broadcasters nowadays with the Ian Eagles, Kevin Harlan's, you're prepping maybe for a couple games. You have a college game. Maybe you're doing a Thursday or a Tuesday night college football game, especially when you're young and coming up and proving yourself. So you really have to be disciplined and committed to learning sometimes a new roster every week. And then maybe a couple of months into the season and you've had a team for a second or a third time, it feels a little more natural. But when it comes to me and my job, I'm covering the Bills every week. I know 50% of the players on the field very well. Broadcasters have to sometimes know two brand new rosters every time they sit down at the microphone. And that is something that I think a lot of people don't see or realize, that the dedication and research that go into that. Watching games, watching game films of games that you already know what happens. So it takes the joy out of it. So you're watching it for work. You're not watching it to see, hey, what's going to happen in this 3rd and 4 situation. You're watching it because you need to learn everything you can about these players you're about to call. And then, of course, I think your dad probably knows a person or two at Syracuse. I think that that's probably a good place to get started. You've been to Syracuse, right? You've been on campus with your dad. What do you think of Syracuse as a location?
It's cold because we went in the winter, but yeah, it looks really cool.
Really cool.
He likes snow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing I'd tell you, Jack, I would advise you to learn everything you can from your dad, and not just because he's your dad and the access you have to him, but a version of this that I tell all my students. You know, the sports part, I wouldn't worry so much about that. That's the easy part, especially if you're a sports fan, and being a sports fan and being interested in sports, you'll naturally learn and absorb as much information and knowledge and insight as you can there. I would do everything you can to practice broadcasting and journalism and broadcast journalism skills. And a lot of that will transfer into being a sportscaster eventually when those opportunities arise.
Here's another thing. This is more for kids, to my kids or anybody that I talk to. Start thinking even now. Well, it's good. It's good in life. It's not even if you're going to be a broadcaster. Start thinking about the words that actually come out of your mouth, because it's very easy when you talk to go on autopilot. Your brain can kind of shut off and words just start tumbling out of your mouth. But to worry about being sharp and economy of words, getting rid of words like, or I mean, that's a big one with me. I say, a lot. I stammer because I'm not a professional broadcaster. I get on this podcast and I'm winging it a little bit, but you never hear a professional broadcaster talk like that. Maybe your dad around the house when he's trying to figure out when he's rummaging through the refrigerator or something. But if he's on camera on Saturday morning or when he's doing any of his pieces, you don't realize it. You don't realize how great they are at speaking and delivery and communicating. But that's the stuff that you hopefully get out of your system in college. But if you start thinking about it, you'll realize how often you hear or you say those words that are just fillers. They're wasteful. And the more efficient you are in speaking, the more brilliant, the more dazzling, the more charismatic you are. And that's how I win so many friends over, is with my brilliant dialogue. Right,
Yep.
Jeff?
Yeah, it's true. That's how you won me over. I was in full swoon mode the first time I encountered your use of the language. I was blown away, and yeah,
Your dad and I like to bust each other's chops, Jack. So when I was saying earlier that your dad can't answer these questions, Jonah kind of went the other way. Your dad is a luminary. He's great in his field. He is going to be able to teach you things just by being around him that you should just pick up. And then if he doesn't, are you waiting to see if your wife's still broadcasting?
You told me to sit up straight.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
That was the next thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, who am I to tell you?
Yeah.
But here comes Matthew Fairburn, by the way.
Oh, good.
And now I've lost track because I got disrupted by Matthew. But I was going to say, your father, if he doesn't pull strings for you and turn you into one of the all-time great broadcasting Nepo babies, I am going to drive to New York and give him a piece of my mind. Here you are. You're going to do the work. If you want to do this, you're already at 13, 14 years old, and you want to do this. You're making your sportscasting debut on probably the greatest platform ever created, and it's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. This is your launching pad. We will be playing this clip on Colbert in 10 years. And they're going to have me pixelated, and they're going to have you and your dad next to each other, and everybody will see how it all got started.
Jonah makes a great point about not paying it. Don't worry about the sports part of it. You're so interested. It's such a part of you to begin with, and it comes so naturally to him that, like, you need to pay attention to the technique and the performance. And Tim, you made this point too, but if anybody out there is watching, I think that's a big thing too. It's certainly huge. It's Syracuse in a new house when all these kids go in knowing everything about sports, just like Jack does at his age. But it's, for you need to be able to write well, which you do sometimes. I mean, 1 out of 8 or 9 columns is solid.
I'm heavily edited.
Yeah.
8 or 9, that's the whole year.
But it's a great point. I don't know what else to say, but you sort of need the magic is in sort of the stuff, the work that you're not doing. The stuff that you don't want to pay attention to is the stuff you should be paying attention to get better.
Joe and I wrote 2 things this week, I'll have you know.
More than me. More than me, actually.
Matthew Fairburn, go ahead and tell Jack Glor how he will get into his dream school of Missouri.
Oh, he wants to go to Mizzou.
Well, I'm just creating a rift. I'm just trying to create some drama here because, Missouri, Northwestern, and Syracuse, right? Maybe Arizona State has kind of come into that conversation. Are those still the biggies?
SUNY
Well,
Brockport.
Brockport is a big one. Yeah, it is.
Where I went.
I think for Jeff's sake, Mizzou has to be the pick. It's much cheaper than Northwestern in Syracuse and much better, I would say. I mean, just look around. Look around the sports folks that went to Mizzou and broadcasting in particular. Forget the writers. A lot a lot of hack writers, but great broadcasting. Jonah Javad was a product. John Anderson was a product.
Gary Sullivan.
John Hamm went to Mizzou for a time. So yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I feel like what's that, John?
I just wanted to say, I'll tell you this, and this, applies to Syracuse, Northwestern, and Missouri, but not all schools. I wish maybe I had known this and thought about this when I was your age. I do think there's a big benefit in going to a Division I college. It gives you opportunities to cover major college sports while you're in college that isn't. Now, when I went to Brockport, I was covering the Brockport teams, and I did get a lot of practice and experience and skill development, but it's a different kind of coverage. And if you're able to cover, a national top 10 football program or a powerhouse basketball program like Syracuse, specifically at Syracuse, you're covering Syracuse basketball shoulder to shoulder with a lot of, professional media. That kind of experience is valuable and not, there's great schools where you can learn a lot and academically wonderful schools, but don't give you that same hands-on experience that you might get at Mizzou or Syracuse or a Division I school like that.
It's a
I
great
will say
point.
this
It's what
because it's just to counterbalance that, because I went to a Division III school, Baldwin Wallace, and I did for a brief period of time, for one semester, I transferred to Kent State because Kent State has a pretty solid journalism program, especially in Northeast Ohio. Anybody who's on the air in Cleveland, I don't want to say anybody, but a lot of they've churned out a lot of people who are now across the country.
Josh Reed.
Yeah, that's right. Arsenio Hall. We could go on. But the thing that was great about Baldwin Wallace was I didn't have to wait. I was able to write for the student paper and do the work at the radio station. We didn't have a television station. Whereas at Kent or some of these other schools, there's so many people who want to do it that you don't always get an opportunity, and you might end up just doing the copy desk. You might not be covering the football team. You might not, because anyways, that was why it was good for me. Although I do think I would have been better off going to a journalism school from the start, but there are some benefits to going to the small school too.
I think Jonah's point about thinking about what you want to
Jack Glor is
cover.
yawning now, by the way. I
Well,
think that we've reached the no
It's
longer
too bad.
interested in Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK portion of the podcast.
It's
Now he
too
gets
late.
from 8 hours of school too.
He was,
have to
he was slacking
consider,
off, you know it.
like what Jonah mentioned of it's almost like where you are is more important than the school that you're at. You're going to learn more by doing. And so, like for me, I thought about some schools in Boston, but ended up at Mizzou because being at a place where there was big time football to cover was something I was interested in. And it worked out. I don't know if that was the most responsible decision to make as a 17-year-old kid to just look for the biggest football program, but that ended up paying off big time. And nowadays, I don't know that you even need to wait around to, even if you're at one of these super competitive schools, maybe the Daily Orange doesn't have an opening, but you can find a blog or somebody that'll get you a pass, that'll get you to start, with social media, you can make your broadcasting debut basically whenever you want, right? And start to, it's a matter of being around the right types of events, and really wherever you are, just owning it. Like you could be at a place where there's Division I college hockey, which isn't a major national sport, but if you own it, it stands out on your resume. And that's where, Jeff, to your point, like thinking about not necessarily thinking about the sports part when it comes to school, right? Because the sports part will come naturally, and just by immersing yourself in it, you'll figure out how to cover sports. And then using the school part to make yourself a more well-rounded human, right? Like learn other things, so that, because when you cover sports, as we found out this week, you're covering more than just what happens on the field. You're covering a lot of stuff that gets messy and complicated in terms of legal stuff and big business stuff. So the more well-rounded you are as a thinker and as a learner in the classroom, the better off you are when that time comes, when something non-sports related happens on the sports beat.
It's really helpful for him to hear, guys. So thank you.
Well, we'll screw him up good. You can imagine like you got Uncle Tim, Uncle Matt, Uncle Jonah coming over, sitting around the house, and Jack's sitting there in the recliner, and all right, let's get after it here now. What are we gonna do here? How are we gonna get about this? What are we gonna do? Yeah, we'll be happy to be your sounding board here, Jack, and to get you all twisted up by the time you're about 18 or 19. We'll be happy to do that. And your dad has no access to anybody else who can provide better advice than us three.
It's really good. I mean, I don't mean to be schlocky about it here, but thank you. It's nice for him to hear. Nice for him to hear this from friends.
Jack, are you a Sabres fan also? Yeah. All right. So Matthew Fairburn covers the Sabres for The Athletic. Give us your thoughts, and we'll let you go. I know this has been a long afternoon for you. Your thoughts?
I want to give Jeff one more tip before we shift gears. Can I give Jeff one more tip? And I mean this. I tell this to other students as well, but I really mean this to you, especially some at your age. Don't rule out or consider maybe not being a sportscaster, in the one sense that the more you get into sports broadcasting, sports journalism, it will affect your sports fandom in a way that if you really love sports and you really want to be a sports fan and really just get all of the fun and enjoyment and thrill out of seeing your team win the Super Bowl or something like that, you might not experience that as a professional sportscaster. And there's different, fun and if you really love sports and sports writing and broadcasting, it can be a little different. But if you really want to get everything there is to get out of seeing the Bills win the Super Bowl, you don't want to be the guy on the sideline with the camera over your shoulder. That's going to change, how you experience that and how much you enjoy watching your favorite teams.
Great point. Great point.
Yep. Sabres, yeah, we didn't watch the game last night. I don't know. What do you think so far? It's so up and down, Fairburn. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, they're like not consistent.
They're consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, like one game they score like 7 goals against like a super good team, and then against like a bad team, they get beaten 3-1 or 4-1. So
yeah, I can imagine for Don Granato, for fans, for people that have been waiting for so long for a good team, this is about as frustrating as it gets. Even though some of those other teams were so bad, it's like this one was supposed to be really good. Still has a chance. It's still 25% of the season. There's still time. Tage Thompson's hurt, all these things, but they have not won more than 2 games in a row all season. And they've only done that once, and it was a month ago. They've just been going back and forth, a couple losses here, then they get a great win, then they, get wiped off the ice by the Devils, then they beat the Rangers when nobody's giving them a chance. So it's a frustrating team from just not knowing which group is going to show up every night. And people hate the excuse, but part of it is because they're young and they're figuring out how to deal with the pressure and how to deal with being this team. But you wonder when it will click, because a lot of these guys are young in age, but not young in experience. They've been around. This is the core that they're going forward with. And it's some of those guys, Dylan Cousins, Owen Power, Matthias Samuelsson, that aren't quite living up to the contracts that they signed so far. That's the alarming part.
Jack, all right, give us the rundown. Who are the jerseys? What are your Sabres jerseys?
Tuck, Thompson, and I had a Skinner jersey from like what was it? The Canadian like classic thing. What was the game that was like outdoor?
Yeah, the holiday. I don't know, what do they name?
It was an outdoor game that like
that was a cool jersey.
It was a super cool jersey for Jeff Skinner that I have. So yeah, 3: Tuck, Thompson, and Skinner.
Have we gotten rid of any recently?
Nope.
Did we have an Eichel jersey?
Yes, we did.
How'd we handle that?
Well, I don't even know what I did with it. I just like threw it out of my room probably.
Well, I don't mean the jersey. How about Jack Eichel winning the Stanley Cup? Were you okay with that? I mean, because you're a fan of the guy, right? At some point, or
I was
that a
cheering
turn
against,
off?
I was cheering against any team to win except Vegas, just because he was on the team.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, but my grandmother called him a turkey.
Well, whoa.
Yeah, it's
God, this is a family show, Jack.
when
Let's-
listen when grandma busts out, when she starts calling players turkeys and Donkey Kongs, you know it's getting serious. It is amazing.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, this has been fun. Jeff, let's plug some of your work. I know that you have a piece coming up on you're a big book guy. You like to get into the books.
Mhm.
You have a Francis Ford Coppola book story coming up. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, quickly. It's a new book called The Path to Paradise. It's by one of our favorite writers or biographers, Sam Wasson. He's written about Audrey Hepburn, Bob Fosse, Martin Scorsese, this book's about Francis Ford Coppola and his life, and sort of the dream of his life, which has been to establish this new kind of film studio, which he's always called Zoetrope. And Zoetrope has produced a whole bunch of films over the decades, but he's always sort of been missing, since that incredible 4-picture run in the 70s of Godfather, Conversation, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now. You know, Francis Ford Coppola has put out a lot of stinkers, and he's been trying to make this one movie in particular for more than 40 years now, called Megalopolis, and he's on the verge of releasing it. It's entirely self-funded, more than $120 million, and he's 84 years old now, and he still dreams of changing the movie business, and I think making these epic films that change everything, like Godfather did. He's hoping to do that with this next movie, and this book is all about his life and his sort of quest to build the perfect studio and to produce the best movies. And that'll be on tomorrow morning.
Oh, fantastic.
Saturday
yeah, right.
morning.
It is
that's when the
Friday. This has
show
been a
airs.
blur of a week, this bye
I know,
week.
right? Yeah.
I had to buy a car yesterday, not by choice. That's not a fun process. When you drive your, I would have a word I'd use if Jack weren't on it. When you drive your jalopy onto the lot, knowing that you cannot drive it back home, and the guy selling you the car is pretty sure that you aren't going to get back in that car, they kind of have you. And I'm sorry.
No leverage.
Yeah. So
That was a good car.
it was not a good day.
We had a lot
it
of
was
good
a
road
long
trips.
day too. And I was the easiest customer. I test drove one car. I bought that car. I put up no fight. And I still was there for 6 hours, I think. So anyway, it's a blur. So tomorrow is Saturday.
Yep.
And Jack has his birthday party that we have to leave for now. So I hate to be the mom.
It's your birthday, Jack?
Yeah.
Oh.
Today?
Well,
It was on Monday, but that was over Thanksgiving. So he's having his birthday party.
Well,
at the
now
Bob's.
your parents don't have to get you anything. They got you an appearance on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.
He went to the Bills game,
Yeah.
so that was part of his present. But
Well, Jack, thank you for doing this. This is a good time to break. I was
you,
going
guys.
to look up Francis Ford Coppola's awful movies and go over some of those. But yeah, that's a good story. I didn't realize that he'd sold his winery to fund this movie.
Yeah, he's done. His life has been a series of big bets, and some have really paid off, like Apocalypse Now, and some have not. And so he's making one final big bet, and we'll talk about that tomorrow.
All right.
What a
Well,
tease.
Jeff
That was a
Glor and
tease.
Jack Glor, thanks for joining us.
Thank
We
you.
can let you go. Maybe Jonah and Matthew and I'll sit around and kibitz a little bit and talk some more Sabres, since we have Matthew on the podcast. Well, we talk some Bills too. Talk some Sean McDermott. But thanks for coming on. It was a good talk. It's a good journalism talk, and our listeners do enjoy that. When we do get into journalism topics, I get a lot of feedback about the people enjoy that. So thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
indulging, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Good luck with everything, Jack. I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll be seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
Jonah, Matthew, talk to you guys soon.
Good
See you,
seeing
Jeff.
you.
See you, Jack. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jack. Okay, so that was fun. How do we want to wrap things up here?
What'd you talk about while I was?
Well, we talked about the Bills and their, the existentialism of being a Bills fan, of being a veteran Bills fan or a Buffalo sports fan, and being a young Buffalo sports fan, what you're getting into. We talked about McDermott. We talked about the penalty issue in the NFL, the corrosive nature of that. We didn't talk much Sabres until you joined us here, Matthew. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and the decision to send Devin Levi down to Rochester. Look, it's like the same with Joe Brady. I'm seeing it on social media now. What are the Bills going to do when Joe Brady leaves to be a head coach next year? After 2 games, people are just like, well, shit, we got to do everything we can to keep Joe Brady, even if it means firing Sean McDermott to keep him. If we got to pick one or the other, we got to make him the next head coach, or else we're going to lose him.
Yeah, I will
Really
say-
saying that.
I will say
I
there
have
is
seen it quite a bit. Yes.
No, Tim makes a good point. I see this more than I see it. Like, I understand the McDermott angst. I have probably fueled some McDermott angst over the last few years sometimes. Like, I understand it. I think he's mashing his head up against the ceiling of his coaching acumen at the moment, and that it's okay to dare to be better than Sean McDermott. I don't think this idea that because they've had so many lousy coaches before him means that the next guy won't be better. They're a more attractive team. They have the franchise quarterback. All those lousy coaches people talk about never had that. But there is a weird suggestion from people, even people that said I would have moved on from him and promoted Dable after 2021. Stuff like that does not happen
Right.
very often, if ever, where you fire the coach but promote one of his assistants. Then what happens to the rest of the staff? The whole thing is a little weird. And the idea that it would happen with Joe Brady after 2 games, the guy's what, 34, 35 years old?
That
He
was my
has-
season-ending satchel last year, was a series of questions, and that was it was so loaded with this type of question that I don't think that there was any pro Frazier, Dorsey, McDermott questions in there. I think there was even some Bean questions about, if he doesn't nail this draft, do we move on from Brandon Bean? But the theme of my of that satchel was, if you'd had asked a month earlier, hell, 2 weeks earlier, people were talking about Sean McDermott coach of the year for the way he got everybody through the DeMar Hamlin thing. And then they lose to the Bengals, and everybody that people used to worry, how are we going to replace Leslie Frazier when he becomes a head coach? How are we going to replace Dorsey when he becomes a head coach? And then within the span of 2 or 3 weeks, it's how can we get rid of these guys faster? And the reason I bring it up, I don't want to stay on that. I was using it because it reminds me of what's going on with UPL. He makes a fabulous underscore terrific, otherworldly highlight reel paddle save, and everybody's like, we got our guy.
Right.
UPL apology forums are going around social media. How did we ever doubt him? The sample size, I mean, people are so easily won over by they just want it so badly. So
Or the opposite.
whether it's Joe Brady or UPL, now I think there are probably people who are like, gosh, how can we get rid of UPL now? Bring Devin Levi back. We might as well let him get the experience of it. Anyways, what's your take on the goalie situation after they had it all figured out 3 days ago, and now it's back in doubt?
It's still all right. I think last night against the Blues, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen allowed. I would have liked to have seen him get, 2 of the first 3, probably. You can nitpick. The first one he should have had. The second one, point blank shot. He didn't get a good look at it because of a screen. I would like to see him kind of fight the traffic a little bit better than that. And the third one was a rebound that, you can criticize him for. That's why I say among those 3, you'd like to see 1 or 2 go in most. that they were down 3-0 and then they have that offensive push. It was frustrating because, they're finally playing the way they should be on offense, and then, some early goals go in against them. But then the defense was a mess after that. Matthias Samuelsson had a turnover that led to an easy goal. Owen Power had a bad play at the offensive blue line that led to an odd man rush. So the defensive zone failed them last night too. I don't think they should be overreacting because they do have Eric Comrie here too. Those two now need to be pushing one another, and they need to let Devin Levi's development breathe. They should have been letting Devin Levi's development breathe more than they did. It was a question I posed to Kevin Adams at the end of the season. How do you go into the offseason with all this optimism about Devin Levi? By the time you know whether that pays off, it's too late to add a goalie, or at least add one of the ones that's available in the summer. And there weren't great options available in the summer, but there's always, the trade market, different things. They go in with the same group. They have 3 goalies, which doesn't really benefit any of them individually in terms of reps and everything getting into a flow. And it didn't benefit Devin Levi from a development standpoint. Now he's where he should be. It's not to say he shouldn't come back up this year, but I think they need to let it breathe. They need to not send him down there in the mindset of how quick can I get back up.
Barring
Go down
injury,
there.
of course.
Barring injury. If somebody gets hurt, he may have to come back up. And if the play is bad enough, right? If the Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen that was in net against the Blues shows up more often, they may not have a choice. But as long as Comrie and Luukkonen play the way they have to this point on aggregate, then I feel like you keep Devin Levi down for a little while until he absolutely... This should recalibrate expectations. I think it should be a major relief for Devin Levi, for Kevin Adams. It's a relief for me to stop talking about how this guy is doing something that nobody's ever done, and I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again. This is not how it's supposed to go. Trying to find this balance where one of the first things I wrote about when I took this job was Devin Levi. I went out to Northeastern last fall, and have, a lot of high hopes for this guy. Like, I think he's going to be a good prospect. He's a fascinating story. He's a great interview subject and all these things. But I felt like I was being pessimistic about him because I kept saying I'm not sure he should be here. I think maybe we should pump the brakes. And so it's kind of a relief, I would think, for him. And I asked him that the other day. He didn't pick up what I was putting down, really. He's being the competitor and the guy, super confident guy that he is. He thought it was a great opportunity to prove people wrong, do something nobody had ever done. But the reality is that he no longer has to think about that. The second he steps on the ice for an AHL game, he will have played in the AHL. He won't have to be the guy that skipped the AHL coming from college, which Ryan Miller didn't do, Connor Hellebuck didn't do. All these guys, great college hockey goalies, did not do. That's a relief for Levi. It should be a relief for Kevin Adams to not have to, feel that pressure and what that might be doing to his development. So all good things. But right now, Kevin Adams, he opened himself up for criticism, I feel like, by sticking with Levi as the number 1 to start the season and essentially handing him the job after a 7-game sample size because he wasn't the best goalie in training camp. But he lucked out in a sense that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen played as well as he did. The goalie situation is not a problem. It's not the reason the team is 10-11-2. Therefore, the fact that the Levi move wasn't the right one isn't as disastrous as it could have been, right? What if Devin Levi's not playing well and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's not playing well and Comrie's, had these injuries and everything? Then he's really putting himself under fire. But the rest of the team's not playing well. The goalies have been decent for the most part. There have been moments. Devin Levi was not good. He did not earn a spot. And I think that's the important part, is that probably more players in that room should feel the need to earn what they're getting. When you tear a team down the way that the Sabres did over the last few years, a lot is handed to guys, right?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Here's all these open roster spots: Dylan Cousins, JJ Peterka, Jack Quinn, Matthias Samuelsson, Owen Power. Come on down. 25
How about
minutes.
the captaincy? Jack Eichel, of
captaincy.
course, was going to start right in Buffalo, but he didn't need to be made the captain so early.
Right. That predates Adams and Granato, but also
But
a
it's
fair
still
point.
the remnants of that are still very
Absolutely.
much being sorted through, or at least hopefully gotten rid of. I mean, there's still some of that dust in the maybe more than just in the corners of the building. There might still be on the very floor, but yeah, there's still a lot of that residue.
Sure. And there just a lot was handed, to players, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like, you want the young guys to get the experience, right? You want to lean on your prospects and let them develop at the highest level. But when you're transitioning into being a competitive team, and when Kevin Adams says he feels like the team's compete level hasn't been high enough on a consistent enough basis, I start to wonder about that element of the top pairing role that Matthias Samuelsson was handed and earned through his play, but now isn't quite earning. Or, this massive, massive role that Owen Power has. Or, Dylan Cousins being a top six center and not really playing like it right now. So I think Devin Levi being in the room when he wasn't playing well, to me, wasn't the greatest message to the rest of the group. Our window is open, right? Kevin Adams said at the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
Playoff. This is a playoff team. Don Granato said this is not a development year. And yet, a 21-year-old goalie is playing the first 4 games of the season and starts 8, 9, 10, and 11 of his NHL career, having never played in the minor leagues. Those two things don't really square.
Right.
Well,
well, go ahead.
So I guess to remove him says we're giving the job to the best goalie, the guy that gives us the best chance to win. And we're no longer focused on what's best for Devin Levi. In a sense, they are, right? This is best for Devin Levi, but they're no longer focused on how can we get Devin Levi games. It's how can we put the goalie in that's going to give us the best chance to win. And that should be the case up and down the roster. That's why Connor Clifton wasn't in the lineup last night. It's why maybe there should be more of that in the forward group as well, because that's the only way to get that consistent competitiveness is to make it so guys feel like, boy, if I don't bring that competitiveness tonight, I might not be in the lineup on Saturday, right?
Let me ask another Sabres question while we have time. I know that you've been at it. You were just podcasting with Chris Baker. It's a lovely podcast that I listen to as often as I can. I think I missed an episode or two.
I think
I've caught most of them. Jonah joined late, you joined late, but we started, we're going almost on an hour and a half here with this podcast. But while I have you both on here, I want to ask about Patrick Kane. The Sabres did not sign him. General manager Kevin Adams indicated that there was interest. It's the first confirmation, really, that there was actual interest, and it wasn't just reports or coming from
Pierre
the
LeBrun
agent or whatever.
Pierre
But
LeBrun
I want to
had
ask about
Kevin
his
Adams
decision.
on the record. For the record,
I'm sorry.
Pierre LeBrun had Kevin Adams on the record a couple weeks ago. Saying
Oh,
they
okay,
were
got it. All right,
so.
thank you. The
Got
Athletics.
to give a hat tip to my teammate there.
That's right. So, Jonah, I'll start with you. Let me bring you in here. Your thoughts on Patrick Kane signing with the Detroit Red Wings and him not joining the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, I never thought it was a great fit hockey-wise for the Sabres, and for Patrick Kane, and for various on and off ice issues. Didn't like the match. I don't discount that the Sabres had some interest, and that Kevin Adams expressed some interest and explored the possibility and considered it, and probably maybe, or I wouldn't say probably, but maybe did want Patrick Kane among the forward groups if they could make something work. But I didn't think it really helped the Sabres with what they needed. Although with some of the injuries they've had, there are ways where it could have made an immediate impact on the lineup. But because of his health, because of his hip, I don't know how much you could have expected from Patrick Kane right away if the Sabres really had the role for him that he covets and he desires, and that the Sabres are competitive enough and close enough to being a playoff team and a Stanley Cup contending team to bring in a veteran at this point, at this age in his career. I didn't like the fit for Patrick Kane, and in a lesser way, I didn't like the fit for the Sabres. I did think it fit, and why this was such an interesting story I thought it would have been a great thing for Buffalo and Buffalo sports fans and hockey fans, not just in South Buffalo where it would have been, the biggest story to ever happen sports wise, but for all, it would have brought some excitement and some juice. And I have wondered, Kevin Adams has seemed to avoid doing this. Maybe you could argue that Devin Levi coming up last year and starting as many games as he did and starting the beginning of the season was an example of this, but he's avoided making the big splash trade or the big splash free agent signing to show the fans we're going for it. The window is open. He said that, but hasn't quite made the trade deadline moves or the offseason moves to do that yet. And this was an opportunity to just add some star power wattage, add some flash, and roll the dice. And for the Sabres to indicate we are doing everything we can to make this team as good as we can right away. And the Sabres didn't do that. I don't know I think they're going to be fine without Patrick Kane in the lineup. I think Patrick Kane is going to be better off not coming back to Buffalo and, exercising some ghosts that might have came with that. But Buffalo sports fans might have missed out on something that would have been interesting to say the least.
My thought, I agree with a lot of what Jonah said there. It would have been the best thing to happen to the Buffalo Sabres as a business since Jack Eichel, probably, right? The initial Jack Eichel drafting him and having that excitement come to town. It would have been huge. And they've needed a shot in the arm. The attendance hasn't been great. The Sabres were absolutely interested to the point that Kevin Adams, Don Granato, and other members of the staff had one of the meetings with Patrick Kane in which they got on a call and explained their vision for him, for the team, and everything else. And that's where my mind goes with this, is that they were that far along, right? Expressed interest going back to July 1st. This was absolutely something that Kevin Adams wanted to do. Whether it was business motivated, I think there was hockey motivation here. One of the great scorers of, his generation, one of the great American players of all time, playing in his hometown for a team that right now is 22nd in the league in goals scored per game, would have helped. I thought it made a ton of sense and was worth whatever risk from the injury. But my mind now goes to Patrick Kane signed a 1-year, $2.75 million contract with the Detroit Red Wings, a team that has been on a similar timeline in rebuilding as the Buffalo Sabres. I believe they are on 7 years with no playoffs, which is the closest team to the Sabres at 12. They are not a perennial contender. They are ahead of the Sabres right now, comfortably in the standings, making them ahead of the Sabres in their rebuild. But Patrick Kane, there were other variables, right? Jonah mentioned, off ice, there were other variables here with Patrick Kane. Signing in Buffalo, that all gets dragged back up. The stuff that has happened away from the rink when he's been in his hometown. That's not the case.
Probably and most notably that the Blackhawks, we had sourcing at The Athletic and from our reporters who are at The Athletic now, maybe weren't at the time, but that the Blackhawks had him move out of Western New York. They thought it was bad for him as a human being and as a hockey player to be in Western New York. And he obliged and apparently agreed and moved out and eventually sold his house.
And that would have been a topic of conversation. Probably
it would have had to have been.
There would have been no way around it. And people can say that that's our fault, but it's the reality. It's a massive variable in his hockey existence here. He signs in Detroit. Nobody's talking about it, right? Dallas, Florida, wherever else. It's not a conversation. He played youth hockey in Detroit. He's comfortable there. When you're a youth hockey player of that stature, your home almost isn't your home. By the time you're 10, 11, 12, you're, moving away from home, playing on all these elite teams, traveling all over the place. So I don't want to pretend that he just picked the Detroit Red Wings because they're better than the Buffalo Sabres. That off-ice thing is a variable. The fact that he could play with Alex DeBrincat, who he played with in Chicago, and maybe have a top-line role with Dylan Larkin, play power play, maybe there wasn't quite that available in Buffalo. Sure. But it's a 1-year, $2.75 million contract. One that the Sabres easily could have matched or exceeded. Patrick Kane chose the Detroit Red Wings. He believed more in the Detroit Red Wings chasing a championship. Chris Johnston at The Athletic, reported that was very high on Kane's list of priorities. I believe the Sabres, in a sense, played their way out of it the way they've played the first quarter of the season. But more so than that is that I think this should fire up Kevyn Adams, the competitor, the guy that won a Stanley Cup, the guy that put together a great career. I think it should fire him up that Patrick Kane said, yeah, I like what Yzerman's building over there a little bit better than what you've got going on. In a sense, that's what he did. And I know there's other factors, but if the Sabres had come out of the gates and were in second in the division and scoring the lights out, that might have pushed Kane in the right, in the direction of signing in Buffalo. And I'm sure the money wouldn't have been an issue for the Sabres because they have more cap space than any team that was in the running for Kane. So,
well, let me start, because the Sabres do have the cap space and the assets and the ability to make another big move. And I think that if they don't get Patrick Kane, but they get another player, maybe not quite as Hall of Fame caliber, but another excellent player to boost the lineup, could they be better off? And would Patrick Kane signing have prevented a better move at the trade deadline or even, at some point down the line?
It's a great question. And I think that's sort of where my mind went next is, were you interested in Patrick Kane because of everything we talked about, right? The buzz. Or are you interested in adding to the roster? And Patrick Kane was priority 1, and now you're going to move on to priority 2. I basically posed that question to Kevyn Adams saying, the door's closed there, but how urgent are you to add to this roster? Because now the door's closed. Maybe you were waiting to make a move because you wanted to see what happened with Kane first. Well, now that that's over, is it still a thing?
Is it possible, Matthew, that the interest in, this is a little bit of the cynic in me, but I'm also just posing it as a thought process, as a question, just because I'm curious, that the Sabres showed interest in Patrick Kane for public relations purposes to show that they weren't dismissive of this possibility. He is local. There were too many connections not to kick the tires on it because, as you say, it sounds like they didn't make that great of an offer, or it is a blatant choice that the Red Wings are just a better organization than the Sabres.
Yeah, I doubt that they offered less money. I don't know. I don't know what the offers were, but 2.75 is not a lot. Had it been 5 or 6, maybe I said the Sabres weren't willing to go that high, but 2.75 is pretty reasonable. I think you're right to be cynical. I mean, we're talking about the Sabres, so, cynicism is justified, and it's professional sports. So, of course, there's some degree of that's healthy. I do think that there's a savviness about, like Jonah mentioned, the Devin Levi thing or all the playoff talk. There is an element of having an eye on the business part, right? You don't talk about needing another year of patience when you also need to sell tickets. You don't, Devin Levi was clearly a draw. So having him, mattered. But there might have been some of that. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter because the actions will be what tell us, in a sense, how urgent Kevyn Adams is. He didn't sound that way the other day when he spoke and said if they raise their compete level that they'll be a better team. But that he likes what he has internally. But you say that up until the point that you make a move, right? And try to shake some life into the team a little bit. So I don't know how desperate they should feel to make a move, but I think it should be encouraging, if it's not just public relations, that they were willing to be in the mix on something like this. And more so than just in the mix, the reason why it would have been a long con for just PR is it went back to July 1st. They had a meeting, right? It wasn't just like, hey, Pat Brisson, keep telling people we're interested.
Well, they could have just said, they could have just been in the loop. I mean, it didn't have to
sure,
be a
but they had the full on meeting, right?
Yeah.
that's where it tells me, okay, they were somewhat serious. Don Granato's got I don't want to, maybe not a full-on reeling hockey team, but a hockey team that is not firing on all cylinders. And he's taken hours out of his day to sit down and explain his vision to Patrick Kane for the sake of it. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, you've taken hours
Well,
out of your day to
that's-
sit down and talk with Chris Baker and Tim Graham and Jonah Bronstein. So
True.
six of one, half dozen of the other. I'm sorry,
I'm
John.
not,
Well, I just want to say, Matthew kind of mentioned it, but there's another cynical take that Patrick Kane and his agency kind of needed the Sabres to be interested in order to be a stalking horse in a way, even if it wasn't 100% feigned interest, because if the hometown team with all the cap space that probably does need, a boost or a shot in the arm, doesn't have interest in Patrick Kane, then why would anybody else in the league have interest in him? And it probably raises more doubts about his health status if the hometown team pulls out. It reminds me in a lot of cases with local athletes in all different sports. If the local Division I schools aren't recruiting a local athlete, well, then the other schools out of state don't like to recruit them because they think, well, what's wrong with them if your hometown college doesn't want you? And I think the Sabres, Patrick Kane needed the Sabres in his corner in that way. And I don't know if it was a purely cynical motive, but the Sabres played ball with that in a way that probably works out for currying favor in the future. Maybe if Patrick Kane, as a healthier version of himself, enters unrestricted free agency in the summer.
Yeah.
yeah, they'll have
Well,
another crack at him. They got to play their way into it, and there's going to be a lot more suitors, and the cap will go up. Well, maybe not a lot more suitors. It'll depend how he plays. If he plays well, and well enough that the Sabres would be interested, it stands to reason other teams would be, and the cap will go up, and so there'll be more money to spend, which would increase the likelihood that other teams get involved. So the topic probably doesn't completely go away, but for now, Patrick Kane ain't walking through that door. So we'll see what answers the Sabres have from here, whether they're in the room right now or not.
What do we think from a journalism discussion about, and I don't think this applies to you, Matthew, there were some people that were pretty certain that the Sabres were either signing Patrick Kane the very next day or it was down to Buffalo and one other team. And there were oblique Twitter references and some maybe stronger reports. Why do you think they thought, it did seem like an inevitability at one point a couple weeks ago?
I never felt that way, and I can't speak for why other people did feel that way, but stories like this I always find tricky because there's a lot of people that know Patrick Kane or know somebody who knows Patrick Kane or know somebody who knows Patrick Kane's cousin or dad or uncle or whatever, right? And so
Yeah.
Buffalo's a small place. South Buffalo's an even smaller place, and rumors fly, and it's fun to talk about. But for me, from a journalism standpoint, for the reasons you mentioned about, well, maybe Buffalo's just this stalking horse, right? Maybe it's like it was really tricky to pin down information, right? Like, how will Patrick Kane feel about coming back to his hometown? I don't know. Only Patrick Kane knows that, really, truthfully. And I guess whoever he shares that with. But, then you're dealing with a game of telephone. How will he feel about having his past dragged back into the picture? I don't know. And when it came down to the interest, the Sabres' interest seemed legitimate to me. But ultimately, when it comes down to the inevitability of a potential signing, Pat Brisson and Patrick Kane were the only two that could really know that. Even Kevin Adams wouldn't know until he gets word. He could feel good. He could, So I have no idea where that information come from, other than maybe some good educated guesses trying to nail one or trying to. And I've always hesitated to do this myself. Is that if I don't know anything, I won't give off the appearance that I do. And, that can sometimes be tough on the ego, right? When you're sitting there and it's a big story and it's your beat and it's like, I don't know what Patrick Kane's going to do. I don't know if I know they're interested. I just don't know if they'll sign him. That to me is preferable to, pretending to know something or taking flimsy information and expanding it into more than it is, because I'd rather really know something so that when I do report things, they're taken as such and not, it doesn't do me a lot of good to feign info, to pretend I have something that I don't. So I don't know how it got to that point. That would be
And
a better question for somebody else.
well, correct. And even behind the curtain a little bit, there were reporters who I respect and think are very smart, and some of them much smarter about hockey and the NHL than I am, that seemed to think this was going to happen. Even if they weren't reporting it, they were bracing for the day when you'd have to go on TV and talk about it. And I thought it perplexing. I don't know if Tim has a take on it, that it never smelled right to me, but it sure smelled like something was in the oven to a lot of other people in the local and the national hockey media.
I made a couple of queries regarding it and was told way too premature. And this was when it was percolating just a couple of weeks ago. There was talk, in the Bills press box after a game about, hey, what happens if the Bills fire Dorsey on the same day they sign Patrick Kane? What do you cover? Like, how do you divide your crew to go cover these stories? And at that time I was told, no, there's no point in girding your loins for Patrick Kane, because if it does happen, it's not happening for a while. But we've been at this for an hour and 40 minutes, or at least this particular podcast. I know you guys haven't, but I have. And I need to wrap this one up because there may be a second podcast that I need to do, which I can talk about after I hit the stop button. But Matthew, thanks for dropping in here and talking about the Sabres with us. Jonah, thank you for battling through your internet issues and joining the podcast. And thanks again to both, all three Glors. We saw the whole family. We got to meet Mr. and Mrs. Glor and their son, Jack, while he made his debut. And thank you everybody out there for listening and watching Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach that takes on each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills to provide creative solutions for their clients. Based right here in Western New York, CTBK is a champion for your business and our community. Additionally, CTBK goes beyond tax and attest services by offering a wide array of consulting and outsourced solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your business, allowing you to focus on your operational and long-term strategic goals. Whether you're a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, the team at CTBK is determined to help you succeed. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400. 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK's one-team approach can work for you.